It's a real slap in the face to be calling this the absolute pinnacle of success in tournament fishing and go to a crummy lake where you only catch a half a dozen fish.
Saw Paul Elias come by shaking his fist at me. I thought he was waving at me. I didn't know he was mad or anything.
What I never could figure out is how he could hold his boat in a position and get down on his knees and run that reel. He obviously worked his ass off, you know.
I fished all day knowing that Jack had a limit and I didn't know how big they were. So I was pretty nervous.
In 1981, Bass founder Ray Scott brought the Classic home to Montgomery, Alabama. It was a landmark event setting the precedent of indoor weigh-ins. In 1982, Bass made a surprising move when Scott decided once again to keep bass fishing's championship on Montgomery's Alabama River.
That was the first time that had ever happened. I think it was all political. It didn't have anything to do with fishery. I felt like they needed that second year, not for the same body of water for the fishermen, but for the outdoor show and to be able to handle that indoor weigh-in.
There was a problem. It's a crummy place to fish. It's a real slap in the face to be calling this the absolute pinnacle of success in tournament fishing. Go to the Bassmaster Classic, which is the Super Bowl of bass fishing, and go to a crummy lake where you only catch a half a dozen fish. I've always thought why they'd ever have the Classic anywhere but a super duper fishing lake, because you're trying to showcase this whole sport. And why go to a place like that?
Money. I don't think the Classic has ever been scheduled in a place that was for the benefit of the fishermen. Hey, you guys are going to catch a lot of fish here. The accommodations are good. The fishery is great. The weather's going to be decent. I mean, it's going to be a good deal. It's never been that. It's been strictly a money deal.
The Classic came back here because it was a success, and the governor liked it, and we just peeled off and did it again. I mean, it was a winner. It was a good tournament, and again, it was an indoor affair, and just right next to the river was this weigh-in facility. Worked perfectly. We packed it full, and there was a lot of energy, excitement.
It was all about the outdoor show and the weigh-in, which, you know, proved to be good business for BASS, and I think history will prove that out.
But beyond that, I feel like Ray Scott wanted to give something back.
There's a lot of economics involved because we didn't have to travel far, having it right here in my hometown. I used to fish that water as a kid.
Ray is that kind of an individual. You know, he just wanted to do something for Alabama. Alabama had supported him in all these years. He's a very staunch Alabama resident, as it were, and I think he just wanted to give something back to the state.
One of the neat things about having the Classic in 1982 was Stanley Mitchell's return. You know, the year before, he had become the youngest guy to ever win the Classic.
I think Stanley was happy about it, but then again, a lot of times, you know, as a fisherman that's won something the previous year and you go back, you know that odds are good. Most everybody knows right where you caught them the year before, and that can have a negative impact on your fishing.
I think that Stanley Mitchell went into the 1982 Classic with a burden. That people did expect him to do well.
That's the way it always is. Well, he won it last year. He's the man to beat this year, and I've never seen that work yet.
Just because you go back doesn't mean anything about who's going to do well the next year.
It's hard to go back and repeat on a body of water. You go back there and you spend half your practice time trying to make what happened last year happen again. And as a result, you know, you're losing a lot of focus. You're not keeping the open mind. You're trying to make happen what happened last year.
You think you got it all figured out, and then it bites you again. So I really felt like a lot of the areas were going to still be just as good, and we had a good bit of rain. And the part of the river that always caught them in the best, it got messed up. That's what hurt me, because all the fish were caught way further south.
In the '81 tournament, the boats and the gasoline capacity, really Swift Creek was about as far as you could go and make it back.
They opened up some new water. They stopped us at Swift Creek the first year, and then the second year they let us go all the way to the Selma Lock.
So in '82, what they did right below Swift Creek, there was a boat landing, and they had like a small tanker truck there, and you could pull in there and gas up.
I basically stayed in that new water and found 4 or 5 places and ended up catching all my fish on really one spot.
Hemphill, Texas was the center of the bass fishing world for a while.
Tommy Martin was the first one, then Larry Nixon, then Harold Allen, then John Torrey, and John Hall. And so it became the Hemphill gang.
Say, who's these Hemphill gang guys? You know, they're all always in the money, you know, they're always doing well. And
Hemphill, Texas. It's not a very big place, but it was the center of the bass fishing world for a while. It's on Toledo Bend.
You know, Hemphill is a tiny, tiny little town. It was back in those days. It is now. It hasn't changed a whole lot. Life in Hemphill revolves around Toledo Bend Reservoir.
A very strong group of anglers that came out of the Texas Toledo Bend guide factory, you might say. Tommy Martin was the first one, then Larry Nixon, then Harold Allen, then John Torrey, and John Hall. And so it became the Hemphill gang.
just something that one of the writers stuck on is, hey, who's these Hemphill gang guys? You know, they're all always in the money, you know, they're always doing well. And it's just a group of us boys that grew up on Toledo Bend, you know, grew up learning to fish a tremendous lake.
The Hemphill gang got a lot of publicity and even in Bassmaster magazine, because there was just this select group of guys from Hemphill that were all making the classic and tournament winners, and they all came here strictly because this lake offers such good fishing.
Toledo Bend still today, probably, if a person was going to say, okay, I want to become a professional bass fisherman, I'm going to move somewhere and start fishing every day, which about the only way you can do that is to become a guide, so you can get paid for fishing every day. But in the process, I'm going to learn how to fish where I can tournament fish, and I'm going to work my way into the tournaments. And all around the country, I would still pick Toledo Bend as the very best school to go learn how to do that, the very best place to learn how.
Guide has to perform every single day. I don't care how many fish you caught the day before, the clients you had the next day wants the same thing or better. So it's you can't live on your past successes. You know, every day it makes you, and it means that you have to adapt and change every single day, and you're under that pressure every single day. So that produced a real hard, tough core of tournament anglers.
I guess in all sports and certain things, you must have a mentor that you look up to and things. And Tommy Martin's a self-made fisherman.
Tommy kind of led the way as far as Texas anglers. He was the best well-known Texas angler in the very beginning. He was the first Texas angler to win a classic. I had a lot of respect for him, and Larry, was fortunate enough to have the opportunity not only to have respect for him, but to work with him.
Well, I first met Larry in about 1975 or so, after I won the Classic in '74. He was a guide here on Toledo. We knew of each other. We'd see each other's picture in the fishing newspaper every week, big stringers of fish. We fished every day. I knew who he was, but I met him one night in a restaurant somewhere, and we talked, and he asked me about tournament fishing. He was thinking about fishing, but he didn't have any money, and didn't have any entry fee money, and didn't have any sponsors at all, of course, and didn't have any help, and he was just barely making a living guiding. So I just told him, that I felt like that he had a real good chance of exceeding at tournament fishing. So I encouraged him to get involved in them.
If it wasn't for Tommy Martin's encouragement and probably a little more of a kick in the pants kind of attitude, Larry might not even have tried this sport.
Of course, the rest is history, as they say. He became the first $1 million angler in bass history as far as overall career winnings.
From Tommy's perspective, if he's a good teacher, should never be surprised by the student or begrudge the student you've taught if he surpasses you. And, you know, and Larry did surpass Tommy.
In 1982, both anglers had outstanding seasons leading up to the Bassmaster Classic. Tommy Martin won a Texas Invitational on Toledo Bend, and Larry Nixon won in Louisiana and Ohio. Larry went on to claim top honors in the 1982 Angler of the Year race.
The Angler of the Year, I think, is the hardest one accomplishment in professional fishing.
You know, I remember Larry winning Angler of the Year that year, and going into the tournament, it was, you know, Angler of the Year is always trying to win the Classic too, you know, and that hasn't happened very often.
The reason it's difficult to win both in the same year is that the Classic, quite honestly, takes an awful lot of luck.
You can win a tournament on luck, but you can't win Angler of the Year on luck.
You're a marked man, really, if you win Angler of the Year. I think a lot of times a guy wins Angler of the Year and he's just so relieved that that portion is over. You know, you did something tremendous that year that you have a letdown come Classic time, and if things don't really work for you for that Classic, you don't have a chance.
At that point in time, he really didn't understand river fishing, especially the Alabama River. Neither one of us ever understood how to fish that river. We didn't know whether to fish in the creeks, whether you fish on the main river, whether you fish deep, whether you fish shallow. And we used a scatter gun approach. We tried a lot of different things and nothing worked.
A negative attitude at the Montgomery River makes you finish real bad, and I probably had that in '82.
Paul was one of the first fishermen kind of in the group of guys that wasn't a good old Southern boy type.
What Paul has, he earned. I mean, he earned it with a lot of sweat equity.
I don't necessarily like everybody on the tournament circuit. Not necessarily everybody likes me, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for all these guys because I know the courage and sacrifices they had to make. But Jack is one of the guys who genuinely, I think, was liked by most everybody, including me.
Jack Chancellor had a good tournament on the Alabama River the previous year, and again, going into this Classic, Jack had to be considered one of the favorites.
In '82, when we found out we was coming back, I thought I might could win that one.
I knew that he was a good fisherman, and I knew he was from Alabama, and I knew he was going to be a threat.
Jack Chancellor was truly one of the pioneers of deep water fishing, deep structure fishing, Carolina fishing, jigging spoon fishing.
One of the things that Jack was doing was fishing a spoon, something I don't believe any of the other anglers were doing.
To tell you the truth, even now, I don't know of many people that fish a jigging spoon in the hot summertime and early fall. Most people think it's a cold water bait.
The second day of the tournament, Jack had found a school of fish and caught a limit in just less time than it takes to talk about it.
Saw some fish on the depth finder and drops a spoon. He doesn't even worry about throwing them in a live well. He just catching them as fast as he can catch them.
Catching lots of fish out on those sandbars. I mean, that was his deal. That's what he was really good at.
The guy understood fish, and he understood deep water fishing and deep structure fishing as well as anybody ever has.
Paul Lass was a crankbait artist. That's what he was known for. And he was throwing those deep running crankbaits that would just put cramps from your fingertips up into your shoulder after about 5 minutes, and he would go out and do it all day long.
Very dedicated, very hard worker, and really applied himself. And what Paul has, he earned. I mean, he earned it with a lot of sweat equity.
He loves the crankbait, there's no doubt about that. He is a fisherman that likes to find one or two places that he can live on, as opposed to running a pattern or running a lot of different spots, doing milk runs like we call it.
Very methodical. He likes to be very precise on setting his boat exactly right, making the right cast, the right length, the right angle, which actually for deep water cranking, which is what he's really known for, that's really critical. And Paul's very good at that.
Paul was one of the first fishermen kind of in the group of guys that wasn't a good old Southern boy type.
I love the individual, the diversity of the people who do participate in tournament fishing.
He was the one that stood out among all the guys. You know, most of us had the old cutoffs on and the beard or the mustache and all that stuff, which was cut pretty close, you know, and our hair out from under our cap. But Paul had all that plus a big long beard and real dark, you know. I mean, he was an individual. He really was.
Well, the biggest joke about old Paul, and of course, you know, I tease those guys because I love them, but he had this old beard on him and a big honker, and I used to tease him. And I told him he looked like the Smith Brothers cough drop man.
And at every weigh-in, Ray would introduce him, say, and when he's not fishing with us, he's modeling with the Smith Brothers cough drops. And I mean, I think a lot of people believe, that's one thing about Ray Scott. He would make these things up and it would sound so real that you would tend to believe them. And if you look at Paul Elias, you'd think, man, he probably did do that.
Saw Paul Elias come by shaking his fist at me, and I thought he was waving at me. I didn't know he was mad or anything.
Man, did Ray pull a quick one on us.
I could tell, like that statute of limitation probably.
What was interesting in the '82 Classic was that Bo Dowden, who had won 2 years earlier, and Elias had pretty much found the same fish.
Kind of an unusual circumstance because it's one of these things where you just kind of get a feeling about a spot. I was hoping nobody'd find it.
I didn't have any particular spot that I was fishing. I just had a milk run of places where I wanted to go. But one of the areas that I had fished, and I caught a couple of fish on, was a place where there was a little bar and there were 4 or 5 stumps up there in front of that bar.
And when I came around the corner, Bo Dowden was sitting real close to it. He wasn't on it, but he was real close, so I thought, well, I'm not going to stop here. So I ran past it.
Saw Paul Elias come by shaking his fist at me. I thought he was waving at me. I didn't know he was mad or anything.
I went down and fished another place and I caught a 4-pound fish. And I waited, and Bo finally left. And I went back up there and I caught another good fish on this spot.
So the next day I went on down the river. I was in the first flight. I fished one spot. Here comes Paul by me and he is boogieing it on down the lake down there.
The second day I went straight to it. And I caught him pretty quick. And Bo showed up in the morning, you know. And
well, he hadn't have any anchor out or anything, so I can fish any damn where I want to fish.
And it's one of them deals. They both found the same fish, you know, and the Classic, I mean, what gives fisherman A over fisherman B any right to have it and the other one not, you know? I mean, this is a pretty important deal, the Bassmaster Classic.
Neither one of them could really back off because I think both of them continued to have an opportunity, and that's when it really does become, where do you draw the line in the sand?
there was a trot line with a dead turtle on it. The turtle was floating, so it was kind of our borderline. Bo would fish down to the turtle and go back, and I'd fish up to the turtle and go back.
The water flow that last day was a lot heavier. Ray didn't do me any favor.
Man, did Ray pull a quick one on us there. This was right down in downtown Montgomery. Everybody kept saying that, man, we got to have some current. We got to have some current to get these fish biting out here on the river.
I had a little pool with the power company. I called this guy, I can tell, I got a statute of limitation probably. I said, look, we got a problem. He said, what is it, Ray? I said, I need some water to move. He said, how much you need? I said, let her rip.
And they ran that doggone water real heavy the Saturday, that last day of the tournament. And I wish they hadn't.
I mean, water was just ripping down through there. When you backed off, your boat would just go in circles because the current was coming down through there. There was cows floating by, there was everything. I mean, it was unbelievable.
It was too much of a flow for me on the things that I was fishing. I would have been better off if they had their normal, just daily generate, or no generating hours there. If they'd had no generating hours, Paul would have been dead in the water, because they wouldn't have, those fish would have never swept up on that bar.
See, Bo was doing more of a milk run than I was, and he wasn't staying there very long. And he was catching one or maybe two fish there, and he'd leave. Well, he stayed a little longer because he knew what I was catching, but he was not on it right. And he was fishing shallower than I was. And that's when the needle and reel thing started.
One of the things that happened in the '82 Classic that again focuses on lures and lure presentations was crankbaiting and what Paul coined as kneeling and reeling.
That became a big deal. That was before the 20-foot crankbaits. That's in the old days when crankbaits would run 12 foot deep, and if they ran any deeper, you'd have to stick your rod down in the water.
Real long cast, and then I would stick the rod all the way into the reel, all the way down in the water to the reel, and I'd reel real slow. And I could get a rhythm going that would make the bait go down and tick that brush in that 12 to 13 foot water. And every 10th time I'd touch that brush, every 10th cast or something, I'd catch a fish.
What I never could figure out is how he could hold his boat in a position and get down on his knees and run that reel and rod 4 foot down the water at the same time and do. He obviously worked his ass off,
And people had used it before. I'd used it before, but it was the deal. And all I was thinking about was winning that tournament, and I had to get that crankbait down there. I couldn't get him to bite anything else. Jack actually was fishing within sight of me that last day, the last 2 days.
I could actually see Paul from where I caught those 11 bass in 7 minutes on that spoon. So he was about a quarter mile up the road from me. So I really felt like that I might have a chance.
Somebody, a press rider or somebody came by like 9 o'clock in the morning. I think I had 2 fish, and somebody came by and said, "Chancellor's already got a limit." And I thought, oh gosh. So I fished all day knowing that Jack had a limit, and I didn't know how big they were. Well, yeah, I was definitely nervous.
7 pounds, 11 ounces, folks. That's good weight.
7 pounds, 11 ounces. That gives Jack a 3-day total of 24 pounds and 8 ounces. And he takes the lead.
Let's give a nice pound hand, folks. Come on now. All right. Bearded Wonder, Laurel, Mississippi. He's got to have, how much, Harold?
Yeah, 413.
Got to have 413 to take the lead. I think he's got it.
I got home and it was a little time with myself, and I sat there and I thought, you really did this, man. Just think about this a minute. You won the Bassmaster Classic.